Wife cheated on me with her brother-in-law and ruined 2 marriages, but now her family blames me for not being considerate of her past trauma. Hi everyone, I'm David, 34 male, and this is probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to talk about. So, where do I even start? Well, I guess I'll start from the day I got that message from Rose, 36 female, my wife Alice's, 32 female, older sister. It was about 6 months ago when everything came crashing down on me. I had just finished a long day at work, and I remember getting home, pouring myself a drink, and thinking it was going to be another normal evening. Little did I know, my entire world was about to change. I got a text from Rose, which wasn't totally out of the blue since our families are pretty close, but this message hit differently. She simply asked if we could meet up in person. Now, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to conclusions, but something in my gut told me that this was serious. I asked her what it was about, and all she said was, "It's about Alice and Terry." That immediately made me feel uneasy. Terry, 39 male, is Rose's husband, and I had always liked the guy. We weren't super close or anything, but I had no reason to suspect anything shady, until then. We met up the next day at a coffee shop. I still remember how tense she looked, like she hadn't slept in days. Rose didn't waste any time, she just pulled out her phone and showed me a series of texts and pictures between Alice and Terry. My heart sank immediately. I was staring at undeniable proof that my wife had cheated on me with her sister's husband. There were messages like, "Last night was amazing, can't wait to see you again," and even worse, photos of them together. Not just flirty pictures, but intimate ones that were enough to make me feel physically sick. It was like the wind had been knocked out of me. I didn't even know what to say to her at that moment. I think I just sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what I had just seen. The shock was overwhelming. The weird thing is, I had zero suspicions up until that point. Alice and I had been together for nearly 3 years, married for 1, and I thought we were solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that would ever make me think she'd cheat. Especially not with Terry, of all people. I thanked Rose for telling me and left the coffee shop feeling completely numb. I remember sitting in my car for a while, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to wrap my head around it all. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Why? Was it something I did? Did they think they could just get away with it? When I got home, Alice was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was any other day. I walked in, and the moment she saw my face, I think she knew. I didn't have to say much, I just asked her point blank, "Did you sleep with Terry?" She froze. That split second of hesitation was all I needed to confirm what I already knew. She started crying, saying it wasn't what I thought, but when I pressed her, she finally admitted that it had happened a couple of times. I was furious. And hurt. And just broken. She kept apologizing, saying it was a mistake, that she didn't know what she was thinking, but honestly, her words felt empty. How do you accidentally sleep with someone multiple times? It didn't make sense to me. She tried to explain that it happened when we were going through a rough patch, but honestly, we all have rough patches, and cheating is never the solution. I couldn't even look at her. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there and pretend everything was okay. It was like our entire marriage had been one big lie, and I didn't know how to come back from that. The fact that she betrayed me with Terry, someone who was practically family, made it even worse. It didn't just destroy my marriage, it wrecked Rose's too. 2 families are torn apart because of one selfish decision. And I think this is where I made the biggest mistake. I shouldn't have left the house that night. I was so hurt and angry, I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to get away from Alice, to put some distance between us so I could breathe. In hindsight, walking out was the worst thing I could have done because the house we live in isn't just some random place we bought together. It's been in my family for generations. My grandparents lived there, and my parents passed it down to me when they moved to a retirement community last year, right around the time Alice and I got married. I had always pictured raising our future kids there, and now, because of one terrible decision, it felt like everything was falling apart. When I finally calmed down after a few days and realized I needed to go back and figure things out, I drove back to the house. I figured we'd at least have a conversation about what comes next, whether that meant marriage counseling, separation, or something else. But when I got there, I found out Alice had already changed the locks. I'm standing at the front door, fumbling with my keys, thinking maybe I was so stressed I just forgot how to unlock my own house. But no, she actually went behind my back, called a locksmith, and changed all the locks. I knocked on the door, and when Alice opened it, she just stood there with this cold, emotionless look on her face, like I was a stranger. I couldn't believe it. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing, locking me out of my own house, my family's house, no less. She shrugged and said something like, "You left, so I thought you weren't coming back." It wasn't just the words, it was how casually she said it, like it was no big deal. As if locking me out of my own home was a reasonable thing to do after she was the one who cheated. It was unreal. I told her I wanted to come inside and talk, but she refused. She wouldn't even let me step foot in the doorway. I'm standing there, trying to explain that this is my house and I have every right to be inside, and she just cuts me off and tells me if I don't leave, she'll call the cops. I thought she was bluffing, honestly. I mean, we've been married for years. I couldn't imagine she'd actually call the police on me. But sure enough, about 5 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pull up in front of the house, and before I know it, I'm talking to the police. Alice had told them that I was being physically threatening, which was a complete lie. I hadn't even raised my voice, let alone laid a hand on her. But in situations like that, the police don't take any chances. They listened to both of us, but they were pretty clear that, for my own sake, it was better if I just left. They suggested I get a lawyer, deal with the situation legally, and avoid any further confrontation. I couldn't believe this was happening. I was the one who had been cheated on, the one who had been betrayed, and somehow, I was the one being forced out of my own home. But I wasn't about to fight the cops on the front lawn and end up in jail. So, I left. I went straight to my best friend's place, where I crashed on his couch for a few days while I figured out my next steps. The first thing I did was find a lawyer. I told them everything, and they helped me file for divorce. Not only that, but we're also taking Alice to court to get her out of my house. Legally, the house belongs to me. There's paperwork showing it's a family property passed down to me, but because she's my wife and we've lived there together for a while, it's not as simple as just kicking her out. It's a process, and a messy one at that. To make things worse, Alice has been trying to paint me as the bad guy. She's telling people that I abandoned her after we had an argument, conveniently leaving out the part where she cheated on me with her sister's husband. She's even made me out to be aggressive, which is absurd to anyone who knows me. I'm not that guy. I've never been that guy. But now, I feel like I'm stuck defending myself, not just in court, but to everyone around us. But this wasn't it. After I filed the case, that's when Alice started talking about working things out. You know how ironic that is, right? I mean, she didn't seem too interested in working things out when she was sneaking around with Terry. But now, all of a sudden, she's desperate to fix things. She started sending me texts and leaving voicemails, saying she made a mistake and that we should try counseling. She was practically begging me to give her another chance. But at that point, I was done. I didn't want to hear any of it. I didn't want to work things out anymore. I wanted her out of my life, and most importantly, out of my house. I thought cutting her off would be the end of it, but oh man, was I wrong. That decision turned into a whole new mess. Now, members from both sides of the family are telling me that I'm the one in the wrong. Like, seriously? I'm the one who got cheated on, and somehow, I'm the bad guy? I got a call from my sister a few days ago, and it didn't go the way I expected. I figured she'd be supportive, right? But instead, she's telling me that marriage is complicated, and I should at least try to hear Alice out. She hit me with the classic, if you really loved her, you'd forgive her. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my phone across the room. Like, what part of she slept with her sister's husband are people not understanding? It's not like she forgot to take the trash out or we had a fight about who does the dishes. This was a full-on betrayal, something that shattered every bit of trust I had in her. And it's not like it happened once in a moment of weakness, either. She admitted it happened multiple times. That's not a mistake, that's a decision, a conscious choice she made, knowing full well what it would do to me, to Rose, to all of us. How the hell do you come back from that? It's crazy how quick people are to jump to her defense now that I'm not willing to work it out. Suddenly, I'm the one who's not being reasonable. My sister went on about how marriages go through tough times, and cheating can sometimes be a wake-up call for both partners to work on their relationship. Like, am I supposed to be grateful she cheated because now we can fix our marriage? It was such a twisted take that I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. And it's not just my sister. Alice's parents have been blowing up my phone too. Her mom keeps texting me about how family is important, and that Alice regrets what she did. She said something about how I should remember the vows we took, as if I'm the one who broke them. It's wild to me that everyone seems to think I'm the one who should be doing the forgiving, the compromising, the bending over backward to save this marriage. Meanwhile, Alice is the one who sets the whole thing on fire. The craziest part? Even my parents have chimed in, and they've always been pretty hands-off when it comes to my personal life. My mom called and said she understood how hurt I was, but that maybe I should consider giving Alice another chance, especially since we've been together for so long. She said something like, "It's hard to throw away all those years over a mistake." I get where she's coming from, but it's not just about the years. It's about the fact that the person I thought I could trust the most lied to my face, repeatedly. And not just any lie, she slept with someone who's basically family. It's a betrayal on so many levels, I don't even know how to explain it to people. I tried explaining this to my sister, and you know what she said? Everyone makes mistakes. You have to decide if her mistake is bigger than your love for her. And honestly, that pissed me off more than anything. Like, it's not about how much I loved her. I did love her, with everything I had. But that love isn't some magical thing that erases what she did. There are consequences for actions, and she's facing those consequences now. I'm not going to sacrifice my self-respect and sanity just because we have history together. Another thing that everyone loves to bring up lately is the complicated relationship Alice's parents had. I swear, it feels like every conversation turns into some weird therapy session where I'm supposed to unpack her family's baggage instead of focusing on what she did to our marriage. Alice's mom cheated on her dad for years. And I'm not talking about one affair or a single bad decision. She had multiple affairs with different men over the course of their marriage. Alice told me about this when we first got together, and I felt sorry for her back then. I can't imagine what it must have been like growing up in that environment, knowing your mom was stepping out on your dad and watching the tension unfold in the house. Apparently, her dad knew about it but never did anything, which honestly blows my mind. He just stayed, turned a blind eye, and acted like everything was fine. I don't know how he managed that, but Alice said he was trying to keep the family together. Over time, though, it destroyed him. She mentioned that he became more distant, stopped really engaging with the family, and eventually, just checked out emotionally. Her parents stayed married, but they were more like roommates by the end. Alice always said her mom was the controlling one, and her dad was too passive to stand up to her, so the cheating went on and on without any real consequences. Now, Alice and her relatives are using this as some sort of justification for her cheating on me. Like, because she grew up in a household where infidelity was just swept under the rug, that somehow excuses her behavior? That's the part that really drives me crazy. They want me to be understanding and considerate of her trauma, but at the end of the day, I didn't cheat on her. She's the one who did this, and somehow, I'm the one who's supposed to be empathetic and forgiving? Alice even said something like, "You know how messed up my childhood was," as if that's supposed to make everything okay. And don't get me wrong, I understand that growing up in a toxic environment can mess with your sense of relationships and boundaries. But that doesn't give you a free pass to hurt other people. I didn't marry her mom. I married her. And I had no idea that she would repeat the same mistakes she swore she hated watching as a kid. Her family, especially her mom, keeps trying to convince me that this isn't really who Alice is, that she's just acting out of unresolved issues from her childhood. They say things like, she's still learning how to have a healthy relationship, or she's afraid of losing love, just like her dad did. Honestly, it feels like they're making excuses for her. And what kills me is that they expect me to stick around and help her figure it out. It's like, just because her dad stayed in a marriage full of betrayal doesn't mean I should, too. I feel like no one is actually in my corner. Everyone keeps telling me to be the bigger person, to try and understand where Alice is coming from, but what about where I'm coming from? I'm the one who got cheated on. I'm the one who got blindsided by the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Yet, somehow, all the sympathy is going to Alice because of her trauma. It's honestly exhausting. So yeah, here I am, stuck in this weird limbo where it feels like the entire world is on Alice's side, and I'm just out here, trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. Honestly, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Any advice would be appreciated because right now, I feel like I'm drowning. Update 1. Hi everyone. First off, I just want to say thank you for all your kind words and suggestions. I honestly didn't expect so many responses, and it's been overwhelming, in a good way. I've been feeling so lost like I'm the only one going through this, but hearing from you all made me realize I'm not as alone as I thought. Some of you suggested I reach out to Rose, and I thought, why not? I hadn't really spoken to her since this whole mess exploded. We were both in such a bad place, dealing with our own versions of the same nightmare. So, I took your advice and gave her a call. Rose said she's been getting a lot of the same pressure from family and friends that I've been dealing with. People tell her that forgiveness is key and that she should consider giving Terry another chance, especially because of their kids. That blew my mind. Like, how do people think that's even a reasonable suggestion after what they did? But Rose, being the badass that she is, said she's blocked all those people and is fully committed to moving on. She's not about to let anyone guilt her into staying in a toxic situation, and honestly, I respect the hell out of that. Talking to her made me feel a little better, like I wasn't crazy for wanting out of this mess. She gets it. She's living through the same nightmare, and she's handling it with so much strength. She told me, "You've got to do what's best for you. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're in the wrong for wanting to protect your peace." And I really needed to hear that. With everyone in my ear telling me I should forgive Alice, it's been hard to trust my own feelings. But hearing Rose say she's ready to move on gave me some clarity. It reminded me that I don't have to justify my decision to anyone, not Alice, not our families, and certainly not to people who don't know the full story. Rose also said something that really stuck with me. She said that the longer you hold on to the hope of fixing something that's already broken beyond repair, the more you lose yourself. I could hear in her voice that she was done losing herself for the sake of a marriage that wasn't worth saving anymore, and I realized I needed to start thinking the same way. I've been stuck in this emotional limbo, second-guessing every decision, and worrying about what everyone else thinks, and it's been tearing me apart. But Rose made it clear, there's nothing wrong with choosing yourself over a relationship that's damaged beyond fixing. I told Rose about all the pressure I've been getting from my own family and Alice's relatives. She laughed in that I know exactly what you're going through kind of way and said it's the same for her. People always have opinions, but at the end of the day, they're not the ones who have to live with the consequences. She told me that people tried to guilt trip her by saying she wasn't thinking about her kids or her family's reputation, but she shut that down quickly. She said, "The best thing I can do for my kids is show them that it's okay to walk away from something that's toxic." Honestly, that hit me hard. I don't have kids, but the message is still the same. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest option, no matter what people say. I've been so worried about what others might think or say about me divorcing Alice, especially since they've been guilt-tripping me with all this talk about love, forgiveness, and loyalty. But talking to Rose reminded me that I can't live my life based on other people's expectations. I've got to do what's best for me, even if it means upsetting a few people along the way. Thanks again to everyone who encouraged me to reach out to her, it really made a difference. Update 2. Hi everyone. Some of you were curious about how exactly Rose found out about the affair, and it's actually an interesting and pretty messed up story. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation or a random confession, she basically uncovered the whole thing like a detective. So, here's how it went down. Alice and Terry work in offices that are really close to each other, almost adjacent. So, it wasn't weird for them to grab lunch together or hang out during their breaks. In fact, Rose never really thought anything of it because they both work in the same industry, and they've known each other for years. She trusted them, and why wouldn't she? Alice was her sister, and Terry was her husband. It wasn't like Rose was looking for any signs of trouble, at least, not at first. But then, Rose started noticing some strange transactions on Terry's credit card. There was this recurring charge that showed up every week. It wasn't a huge amount, just a few dollars here and there, but it was near both their offices. At first, she assumed it was a restaurant. Terry told her he was grabbing lunch with coworkers sometimes, and with Alice's office being so close, she figured they were just grabbing a quick bite together. It was normal, right? Nothing suspicious. But Rose couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The charges were consistent, happening like clockwork every week. She brushed it off for a while, not wanting to jump to conclusions. But then one day, when she was picking Terry up from work, he dropped his car off at the mechanic or something. She saw the name again, on a sign. Except, it wasn't in a restaurant. It was in a hotel. When she saw that, everything clicked. I can't even imagine what was going through her mind at that moment. She told me that her stomach just dropped, and she got this overwhelming sense of dread. I mean, how could she not? All those small charges that she thought were for lunch suddenly had a much more sinister explanation. At that point, she knew something was seriously wrong, but she didn't confront Terry right away. Instead, she waited until they got home. That night, after Terry fell asleep, Rose checked his phone. She didn't want to, but she couldn't just sit with that feeling in her gut without knowing for sure. And sure enough, she found everything. Texts, pictures, videos, everything. Alice and Terry weren't just having an emotional affair or meeting up for coffee like she'd hoped. It was so much worse. They'd been sneaking off to that hotel regularly, and the text left no doubt about what was going on. From the way she described it, it was all right there in black and white, intimate conversations, plans to meet up, even photos that made her want to throw up. Rose told me that it was one of those moments where your whole world just shatters in front of you. She couldn't believe it. Her own sister. Her husband. She said she didn't sleep at all that night, just stayed up scrolling through the messages, trying to wrap her head around how the two people closest to her could betray her like that. The next morning, she didn't even confront Terry. She needed to talk to me first. And that's when she told me. Also, for those of you asking about Alice's parents and where they are now, that's a bit of a complicated story in itself. Alice's dad passed away a few years ago. From what Alice told me back when we first started dating, her dad was a good guy, but he wasn't exactly the type to stand up for himself. He knew about Alice's mom cheating on him for years, but he never left her. He just kind of let it happen like he was too tired to fight or didn't have the energy to change things. It's sad, really, because from what Alice said, it wore him down over time. By the end, he wasn't the same man he used to be. When Alice's dad passed away, Alice and her mom didn't have much of a relationship left. They had drifted apart over the years, and Alice never forgave her mom for how she treated her dad. I remember Alice telling me how much she resented her mom for being so manipulative and selfish. It was a huge point of tension in their family, and it definitely affected Alice growing up. Her mom was this overbearing, controlling person who thought she could do whatever she wanted, and Alice always said she wanted to be nothing like her. That's the part that really stings in all of this. Alice spent so much time talking about how she never wanted to follow in her mom's footsteps, how she hated the idea of being someone who could cheat and hurt the people who loved her. And yet, here we are. It's like she ended up becoming the very person she swore she wouldn't be. I don't know if it's because of the way she was raised, or if it's just an excuse people are trying to make for her now, but it's hard not to see the parallels. As for Alice's mom, she's still around, but they have no contact anymore. Alice cut her off a few years ago. It happened slowly at first. Alice would stop visiting as often, and their phone calls became less frequent. Eventually, there was a big blow-up between them over something that had been brewing for a long time. I wasn't there for the argument, but Alice told me afterward that she'd had enough of her mom's manipulative ways and didn't want her in her life anymore. Honestly, I didn't blame her at the time. Her mom sounded like a piece of work, always trying to guilt-trip Alice into feeling sorry for her, even though she was the one who destroyed their family. Update 3. Hi guys. I know it's been months since I last posted, but I've finally got some updates, and let me tell you, it's been a roller coaster. The whole legal process dragged on for what felt like forever, but I'm relieved to say it's finally over. That was a huge relief. Alice tried to argue that she deserved part of it because she lived here during our marriage, but the fact that it's been in my family for so long worked in my favor. But I won't lie, there were some stressful moments during this whole process. Alice tried to play dirty at times, throwing accusations around and trying to paint me as the bad guy. At one point, she even hinted that I had been emotionally neglectful in the marriage, which, honestly, felt like a low blow. I mean, I wasn't perfect, but who is? We all have our moments, but I was never anything but faithful and committed to her, even when things got tough. I thought we were a team. I guess in her mind, that justified what she did, but for me, it only made it harder to keep my composure when we had to face each other in court. In the end, though, the judge saw through all of it. The ruling came down, and it was pretty clear-cut. The house is legally mine, and Alice had no real claim to it. She was ordered to move out, and, I have to admit, watching her pack up and leave was one of the most surreal moments of my life. There was part of me that felt relief, like a weight had been lifted, but there was also this weird sense of finality that hit me. It was like the last chapter of this crazy, painful story was closing, and as much as I wanted to move on, it felt strange to watch someone I once loved walk out of my life for good. We're officially divorced now, which, honestly, feels good to say. It's still weird when I catch myself thinking of her as my ex-wife instead of just Alice, but I guess that's normal when you've been with someone for so long. The only downside is that I do have to pay alimony. I wasn't thrilled about that part, but it's just the way the legal system works, I guess. She's not working full-time right now, and even though I'm not happy about supporting her financially after everything she did, it's a small price to pay to have her out of my life. Thank you all for your advice and support through this mess, I really appreciate it.